Welcome to Books Under Your Bed. Today I wanted to talk about Poppy Z. Brite. He now goes by William Martin, um, but back in the day, probably the 90s, he wrote three influential horror novels. He also wrote lots of short stories around the time, but he got a deal with a publisher to write three novels after he wrote the first one, which was Lost Souls, which I've read. The second novel in that contract is this one, actually, Drawing Blood, which I have not read. That's why I have it. And the third novel was going to be Exquisite Corpse. But the publisher rejected the book because of its content. They thought it was excessively violent and gory and deranged and morbid. So they let him out of his contract and he found a different publisher and he published it with them. I personally like Exquisite Corpse more than Lost Souls. Lost Souls is about these two singers, or these two people in a band, in sort of the New Orleans area that come in contact with vampires. The vampires are really vicious. They're not Twilight type vampires. Exquisite Corpse, to move on from that, has a pretty strong premise, I think. It's really about if the serial killer Dennis Nelson and Jeffrey Dahmer fell in love. If you don't know who those two people are, Dennis Nelson is a serial killer that was in the UK, who was a necrophiliac who killed gay men predominantly and found sexual pleasure from dead bodies. And he would cut them up and dispose of them. And Exquisite Corpse starts from that character's perspective. Jeffrey Dahmer is more familiar in the United States because he was a serial killer here. He also targeted gay men. And so Exquisite Corpse starts from the first person, the Dennis Miller perspective. He gets caught and put in prison, and he figures out a way to fake his own death and escapes and flees to New Orleans. And in New Orleans is the Jeffrey Dahmer character, who's stalking people and killing them. While all this is happening, there's two other main characters. Lucas and Tran are in a relationship, and Lucas finds out he has AIDS, and it doesn't go well for their relationship, and they break up, but Lucas is still obsessed with Tran. And he has a radio station where he complains about the state of the world and the US government's neglect of the AIDS crisis around the time that the novel's happening, which is pretty much the height of the AIDS crisis in the United States. So the novel itself is very angry about AIDS. It has a perspective of the wider society views gay people as monsters. And so this book has actual monstrous people to sort of illustrate that anger and feeling of the time of the 80s. I think that what sort of raises the bar for me for this novel is that it's like one level below camp. So it's serious, it's morbid, it's intense, but it's pushing it to a slight operatic level of tragedy and melodrama that makes it more palatable, even when it's one of the most gross books I've ever read. I can understand why it's having sort of a moment now of like TikTok telling people this is the most disturbing book I've ever read. You should read it. And people reading it. I think that it's has deeper levels and more interest than just being gross or disturbing. So if you want an intense, very graphic book that has deeper levels about gay characters, this is a horror novel that's definitely worth reading. Hopefully this told you a little bit about Poppy Z. Brite / William Martin's career. He's an underrated or underread horror writer from that time that I'm glad is getting more attention now. Okay, that pretty much wraps that up, but I did want to thank you for watching, and hopefully you liked what you saw. So like and subscribe if you want more discussion of horror novels, fantasy novels, science fiction novels, anything really that I find interesting and worth sharing. Thanks again.